All right, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the JavaScript DOM and how it references to the HTML and how we can utilize JavaScript to create content or change the content that our user is seeing in order to create a more dynamic and reactive user experience when it comes to HTML. So now, when we learned HTML recently, we learned how to create boxes. We learned about the CSS effects, and a couple of you even went to the extent of creating different hover effects, different clicker effects so that it alters your pointer. And that's good. And it shows a little bit of reactiveness when it comes to the user experience, right? Well, JavaScript will take it that much further. JavaScript will allow us to actually create content or move content around inside of our HTML or CSS, depending on what the user is doing. So today we're going to be breaking down the DOM, first of all. Now the question is, well, what is the DOM? The DOM stands for Document Object, Document Object Model, right? So let me go ahead and write that down there, Document Object Model. So now that's great and all, but what exactly does that mean? Well, as I mentioned earlier, everything in HTML and CSS, it's just boxes inside of boxes, right? So first thing we have is, oh, hello. There you go. First thing we have is our entire HTML page. So HTML, and let me go ahead and. Okay, so now other than our HTML page, we also have a smaller page. And this right here will be the body. Now within the body, we may have headers. Excuse me. Okay, we may have a header or okay. We could also have a main. And we could also have a footer. And we can also have a nav. So let me create a nav before I forget about it. What am I doing here? That's not what I'm trying to do. This would be the nav. There you go. Okay, so there's our HTML page, right? We got a bunch of boxes within other boxes. They're all working great. Now, inside of here, I can also have other elements. Maybe I can have an H1 up here, right? For my header, maybe I have an H1 element. And let me make that small. Maybe it will fit in that case. Oh, looks like that's the smallest I can make it. But maybe I have an H1 element. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so that it can fit better. And that H1 element just says something like, hey, welcome, you're here inside of this page. Okay, great. So now what could the nav bar have? Anybody want to walk me through building the nav bar?
You could have an unordered list.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely have an unordered list. So let's see what that looks like here. Okay, so I could have an unordered list. And this unordered list would then have what within it?
Maybe buttons.
Yeah. And all of these buttons would be what kind of items?
List items.
Yeah, so they would all be list items, right? Ooh, that totally messed up here. But not only would they be list items, what would be within the list item?
Probably a link.
Yeah, so an anchor tag, right? So we know that all of these would be list items with anchor tags. Maybe I can make this a little bigger. Okay. Great. And then when it comes to the main, just to make things short, that because I don't want to have to keep drawing over and over again for everyone. We could have multiple divisions, right? And then inside of these divisions could have paragraph tags, or maybe they can have image tags, or maybe they can have both, right? So let's go ahead and copy that and say that that's what's inside our main, right? These are the things that are inside of our main. And it's all just boxes within boxes. Okay, great. So we just built an HTML page just by drawing it out like this, right? We could turn this all into code. So let's try to turn it into code real quick. All right, how do I turn this page here into code? Anybody want to walk me through that process?
First you would need to, I forgot what it's called, but you press exclamation point,
Uh-huh.
then enter. It'll
Okay.
give you, yeah, the basic. And that'll give you your pretty much the body, and then your title, header. And then what you would do is header, name. Then within your main, you would have two divs.
Can someone provide me a fun image source that I can plug in here, please? And appropriate for the recording of the class. Okay, so then we have one division, and let's make two of them. Okay, so now we have two divisions, just like we have here. Each one of them has a p tag, and they also have an image tag. And maybe instead of having this arrow, because this arrow signifies that it's within the p tag, we should have a plus. Is that an image source? Background image. Okay. Jesus, that's an image. Okay, the other one's shorter, so I'm gonna go with the other one. Okay, so now we have our image source, we have our two divs, so our main is complete. Can someone other than Frank walk me through creating the header?
Need an H1 tag.
Okay, an H1 tag, and hello, Victor. Platoon. All right, it seems like we're missing an element between our header and our main. What element is that?
Your nav.
F bar.
Nice. So let's create that nav bar. Okay, now how do I create this nav bar?
Just an unordered list with list items, with an anchor tag in each.
Nice. And let's just make hrefs like this. Home. Oh. Home 2 and home 3. We'll do it this way for now. Okay, so now we have our anchor tags with list items. We have our division. And our footer currently doesn't have anything, but let's just put something in there, maybe a p tag. Just so that we have some content. Okay, so now we just turned this entire little drawing into HTML, right? We have our HTML at the very top that's encompassing everything, just like we showed here. We then have a body. That body contains a header, contains a nav, it contains a main, and it contains a footer, and we put the appropriate elements within each one. Well, now what happens when we go live? Let's see. Okay, when we go live, this is the picture that was provided to us. We have this hello Victor, and then we have these cats right here. Okay, this is looking great. The only thing that I really want to fix is this nav bar. So I'm just gonna add some quick inline styling here. And I'm just gonna make it flex. Make it width 100%. And let's make it justify content space around. Okay. So there you go. So now I have my Victor platoon. There's my header. There's my nav bar that has 3 links. Inside of my main, I have 2 divisions with a p tag and an image. And then finally in my footer, I have a p tag that has some text. Nice. Okay. So we've already covered this before. We've seen it before. But what exactly does that mean in reference to JavaScript? Well, now, when we go to write JavaScript and we want to grab one of these elements, we can actually utilize JavaScript to reference to this model that we just created, right? So in JavaScript, whenever you go to create something that's referencing the HTML or the document that you're currently working with, you'll write something like document. And by writing document, I am referencing to the HTML. All right, so it might be easier if I move it this way. Okay, so now let's say that within the HTML, right, I wanted to grab, oh, and that's actually also referencing to the body. Let me make sure here. Okay, we can go to JavaScript and do document.body. Yeah, so we'll have to enter the body next. So there's my document dot. The next thing that I would want to enter is body. All right, so now I'm entering the body of my document. And let's say I just wanted to grab one of these image tags, right? So the next thing that I would do is grab main. Oh, hello. And then what would be the next thing that I grab? If we're going by this example, what I have so far, right? I have document dot body. So it's going within the body of my document. It's entering my main tag. And I want to make sure that I grab one of the image tags within here. What's next?
Div.
Okay, dot div. And then dot what?
The image within the paragraph.
Yeah, dot image, right? And that would just grab the first instance of the image within a paragraph. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Rather than writing it here, we're going to go to our HTML and actually try to break this down, right? It's essentially just a tree. If we really think about it, the document object model, you can just reference to each individual one of those boxes, right? And it starts with one box being document, and then after that it goes into body, and then it goes into 3 separate branches. You have your header, your main, and your footer, and you also have your nav. So 4 separate branches. And then after that, you select a branch, and then you go inside of it and look at the elements within it, and so on. So let's write a script tag here that we can utilize to write some JavaScript code. So now, let's say within this script tag, I want to just grab the value of hello Victor Platoon, right? And before we even do something like that, let's just console.log something like good morning to make sure it's working. I go over to my document. I go to inspect the browser. And if I look at the console, I see good morning being console.logged, right? That message is being logged onto the console of my browser. So I see good morning. So I know that this is connected properly and it's able to run my JavaScript code. Okay. So now I want to grab the content of hello Victor Platoon and I want to print it into the console. I want to see what the value of this h1 tag is. How could I do that? Right. So far I have console.log good morning, but now I want to see header. Oh, this JavaScript value. What do I assign header value equal to?
Would you equal to h1?
So we have this h1 tag here, right? But I want to utilize the document object model to be able to reference this h1 and grab the value currently within it. So the first thing that I would write here would be document, right? And that would grab the entire HTML doc. What would then follow that?
Body.
Okay. So I enter the body. What's next?
Header, then h1.
Okay. And then let's just do inner text, right? Because I want to see the inner text within it. And actually, let's take it one step at a time. Let's console.log the document, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we can see that it opens up in the console, and I see this document tag. Well, if I open it, gives me quite a bit of information, right? Gives me all of these different functions that I can use. But the main thing that I want to see is all of its children. So we can see here's the active body. And here it is, child nodes or children, right? So it tells me that it's children, it's just HTML. That's what it's grabbing. If I look at all the HTML collection, it's telling me, hey, this thing also has a head. It also has a body, and within the body, it has a couple of instances, which are referenced down here. And it continues to break it all down. And here we can see the inner HTML, right? It's telling me that within the body, there's this inner HTML. That's what's being interpreted into an actual site. Oh, sorry about that. So now what if I wanted to see document.body? What will I see then? Oh, I see null, which is interesting. I didn't expect that one. Okay, so let's go into the children. Cannot read properties of null. Interesting. There you go. This isn't exactly working the way I was planning it to. This is interesting. All right. So I have this document, it's able to see the children, and I know that there's certain things that I can see within it. Let's see, document dot. Even if I just do document dot body, it's already returning null. That's interesting. I'll have to go back into breaking this down a little bit further. But for now, let me go ahead and talk about selectors so that we can continue moving forward with our lecture. And then afterwards, I'll come back to breaking this down a little bit better. Okay, so we've gone over how to each portion of my HTML content is broken down. But I can grab things straight from my document if I wanted to give my H1 value or my H1 header some sort of identifier. Now, my H1 is unique, and I know that it's the header itself. So how could I make this H1 or give this H1 some sort of selector that I know will be unique and will only happen once within my document?
An ID tag.
ID.
Give it something like an ID, right? So I'm going to say ID is equal to header title, and we are in JavaScript now. So now instead of referencing to document.body, what I can say is document.get element by ID. And now it knows that it's looking for an element that has an ID. And I can specify this should have a header title. This is the ID that you are looking for. So now let's see what happens when we look at the console and the console.logs our header value. It's still giving me null for some reason. Oh, that would make sense. If it's running the script tag prior to everything rendering, that makes sense. Let me go ahead and put this in the footer here. And that's actually working. Good catch, Polina. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so Polina brought up something to my attention, right? The code is being executed, and it's being executed immediately when the HTML document is loading, right? Because I have it in head. I'm telling it, hey, before you start reading any of my HTML document, I want you to run this specific script tag. Well, when it runs this JavaScript code, I tell it to find this ID, but currently it's still in head, so there's no such thing as that ID. That ID doesn't exist just yet. So I had to move it down to my footer so that it's the last thing that happens whenever my HTML page loads. So now I can see document header get by ID, and if I come over, it's actually me showing me the header title. All right. And now within the header title, I can look at all of the properties that it has. I can look at its children. I can see that it has no children. I can look at its class. It has nothing in there. And I can see that it has text. It has inner text. And it also has this inner HTML, which shows me any HTML that's within that tag. And I have this inner text property that shows me any text that's within the tag. So if I wanted to just see the value within it, I can just say console.log header value, inner text. And now we can see hello, Victor Platoon. Okay, I've covered quite a bit. It's been quite a bit of time me talking. At this point, does anyone have any questions over anything that we've covered so far?
Could you go back to the code, please?
Of course. Oh, that's not it. You just want to see it or you have a question?
I'm just taking notes.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, it doesn't seem like there are any questions, so I'm going to attempt to do the example that I was doing earlier. So let's go ahead and console.log. And let's do document.body. Okay, so now we can see the body's actually rendering. And within the body, we have a couple of children, right? Inside of the children, I have a header, I have a nav, a main, a footer, and a script. And it's telling me that this is a array, all right? And within this array, I have 4 indexes. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. So let's say dot body dot children. So in children, I have a header that also has more children. So let's go in there. So at index 0, which is my header, I also have more children. So I can say dot children. Now let's take a look there. So now it's within the H1 element. It tells me it only has one place inside of this array. And this one place does not have any children, right? We can see the children list is empty, but it does have inner text. So now if I wanted to grab that value, I can say 0 dot inner text. And if I take a look at my console, I get hello Victor Platoon, right? I was able to go into the document. From the document, I was able to look at the body, which if we reference to the drawing that we created in TL Draw. So here's our document. We're able to look at the drawing. I look at the children within the body. And in this case, the children that were within the body. Let me see if I can put that back real quick. The children within the body were header, nav, main, and footer. I enter index 0, which is my header. All right. After that, I take a look at the children and I enter index 0, which is my H1 tag. And my H1 tag has no children, but it does have inner text. So I'm able to look at the inner text of my H1 tag, and that's how I'm able to console.log hello Victor Platoon. Now, it didn't work before and it worked this time. And again, the reason why it didn't work before is because I had my script tag over by my header, which is prior to any of this information actually existing. I had to move my script tag down to my footer. Okay. So now I'll have you guys walk me through how could I utilize the document object model to grab this image tag, right? What if I wanted to change the image source of this tag? How can I do that? So let's walk through getting the image. So let's say image is equal to something, and let's console.log image. And let's see. Let's go with Mason. What would be the first thing that I would put here?
Document.
Okay, so I start off with document. Caleb, what's next? I don't know if you're muted. I think you're muted, Caleb, just in case you've said something.
Sorry, yeah, get element by ID.
Okay, our image doesn't have an ID. I want us to utilize the DOM.
The
in there.
oh dot body.
Okay, so I go dot body. All right, Kate, what would be next?
It's nested in dot main, right?
It is in main. But I don't have access to dot main, right? So if I do dot main and I take a look here, it's gonna tell me cannot read properties of undefined console.log. I don't know where that's coming from.
Sorry, I wasn't coding along. I didn't see how many things that's contained in.
No, yeah, definitely. That doesn't make that makes sense. So we have the document, we have the body. Oh, I'm doing this all
So
wrong.
you be the children of the body, I guess, and then whichever child the div is that the image is in will be the one we want.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so let's take a look at what we have here. So currently we're looking at the children within the body, all right? And we have header, nav, main, footer, and script. Which one of these indexes in the array do I want to enter, John?
Oh, main. 2.
Okay,
Index.
so I'm gonna enter index 2, which will be my main. And now when I take a look at the console, I can see main. Which one of these properties do I want to enter next? And this one, let's give it to Josh. Which one of these properties within my main do I want to enter? You're muted, Josh, just in case you said something.
You talking to me or Josh Minshew?
Oh, Josh Kim. I apologize.
We're trying to get the image.
Correct. Yes.
Mm, children 0.
Nice. So we're gonna go into the address to the array of children, and we're gonna grab index 0, which is the first division. Okay, and in this first division, I have these properties, right? So here's my children nodes. I have a p tag and an image tag. What's the next step to be able to grab that image tag? And let's go with Frank in this case.
You would put dot img, I think, or no, children, dot children, and then 1.
Nice.
Index 1.
So I go dot children because I want to enter the children within that division, and I want to enter index 1 because that's what's going to give me my image tag. Okay, so now this image tag has a couple of other things. So I can come down to see what properties it holds. We know that it has no names. It has no children. And as I scroll down, here's attributes. So here's the attributes. It has a source. And if I open up the source, it tells me where that source is going to. But I think that's the wrong one. Let me make sure I'm looking at it correctly. Where'd you go? Here it is. So here's the source, right? I have a property of source. And then here is able to give me the source as well. So how do I console.log the source of this image onto my console? And let's go with Chad for this one.
It would just be dots on src.
Nice. So it's a dot src. And there it is. There's the source of our cat. All right. I'm able to open it up and I can see our cat in my console because that's where it's coming from. Great. Does everyone understand how to utilize the DOM? Oh, go ahead, Robert.
I was sorry. Do you mind doing a quick walkthrough of that? Just how we got those children and everything?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go ahead and take a look at it here.
And would we like once we move ahead, is this what you normally do, or do you just give someone an ID and plug the ID in?
So it's important to know how to utilize the DOM this way, just because sometimes you might run into something like front-end testing that's very specific that test is utilizing something like this, right? Am I going to a specific model or a specific portion of your HTML and check that something exists and holds that content? But typically you would want to give something some sort of selector so that you can grab it and manipulate it. Does that answer your question, Robert?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So here's my body, right? If I look inside of the body, I can come down and take a look at the children. Children is an attribute or a property that exists within this object, because body is just an object. It's a dictionary. These are all key value pairs, right? And I know that if I enter the key of children, I can look at the array of 5 indexes. So let's do that. Let's say dot children. So that takes me to the array of the 5 children that is within the HTML document that I created. Well, from there, I want to make sure that I enter the main, right? And it's even highlighting it for me. It's telling me, hey, this is what main is. Okay, well, that's index 2 of this array. So I would just simply place index 2. Once I do that, it's going to open up my main. Oh, no, it's doing it incorrectly. Why is it showing it this way? Okay, and I know that main also has the property of children. So I can enter children this way. And there you go, it gives me back an array of 2 elements. There's 2 divisions in there. I want to enter the first division, the first division, which would be a 0. And that tells me, hey, this is a div. Okay, and that div, I know has 2 children. It has a p tag and an image tag. So again, I can say dot children. And I can select 1 for the image tag. And now within the image tag, I can look at all the attributes and properties that are in there. But I know what I want is the source, and that is down here as src. So now I can just run dot src. And that's how I get my image tag.
Okay, I'm tracking now. Appreciate that.
Of course, no problem. Any other questions? Go ahead, Josh.
So I noticed how like you did like children ever since body, until like the last thing we wanted, which is src. Is that like, can that be represented as the children of the image somehow?
Yeah, it's a good question. So children are reference to anything that's wrapped within HTML, right? So body has 5 children. 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why was it telling me that it was 5? Maybe something that I'm missing here. But body has these children, right? And then if I look at the header has only 1 child. But this h1 tag isn't wrapping anything, right? It's only displaying text. So does h1 have children?
Oh no.
Right. So it's the same thing as the image tag, right? We enter the body, we look at the children, then we enter main. Main does have a couple of children, has 2 of them. We open division. How many children does division have?
2.
Yeah, it has 2. It has a p tag and it has an image tag. But this image tag isn't wrapping anything. So does the image tag have any children?
No.
Exactly. It's just holding 1 source, right? Which is an attribute, and that takes us to our cat. Does that answer your question, Josh?
Yes, thank you.
Of course.
Does the script tag count as a child, a body?
It shouldn't. Let me go ahead and check here. If I take a look at the console, no, it does not. It has the header, the nav. Oh, it does. It does count. The script tag did count as a separate child. Huh. That's a new one. Did that answer your question, Megan?
Yes, it did. It's weird though, because you can see in the top, like it says collection of 4, and down below there's 5 elements, like a length of 5. So
Right.
that's weird.
Yeah.
Can you access this script though? Like, it seems like it would be, I know like hackers would want to be able to do that. So maybe that's why.
Doesn't seem like you can access it.
Well, if you did like children and then 4, that would just show the script, wouldn't it?
Let's try it out. Let's see,
And I
children.
do know with the thing to the hackers, you can inject a script into a website if you don't prevent it.
Oh yes, definitely. And we'll be talking about how we could prevent that. It's called cross-site 4G, I believe. But we'll talk about how we can make sure that we prevent that stuff later on once we start talking into our Django framework. But right now, if I try to enter index 4, even though it showed me that there was an index 4, it's giving me undefined. So it's not allowing me to actually open up that script tag.
That's really cool.
Awesome. All right. So now we have this information. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of selectors that we can utilize to do something, right? Let's see. So let me comment this out. Comment this out. Okay. And I'm just going to go back to this get element by title, right? We know that this is referencing to the header title. Well, currently right now, the header title is Hello Victor Platoon. But what if I wanted to change that, right? What if I wanted to make it something different? Well, what I can do is I can go ahead and change the value within it in here in this script tag. I can say header value dot inner text. And let's just make sure that that is the correct thing. Let's console.log it onto our console. Okay, we can see that it's coming back as hello Victor Platoon. Well, maybe I want the inner text to say goodbye Victor Platoon. So let's see what it does today. Let's make that equal to goodbye Victor Platoon. Well, now we can see that the title changes, and notice that if I refresh it, oh no, it does it too fast. Okay, so the original value was hello Victor Platoon because that's what was provided in the HTML document. But through JavaScript, we were able to change the value from hello to goodbye Victor Platoon. We simply grabbed it by the ID, entered its inner text property, and then changed the value of its inner text from hello Victor Platoon to goodbye Victor Platoon. Does anyone have any questions about how that works?
So if you did that on a website that wasn't protected, would you actually change would you change the header of their website?
One more time.
If you went into the dev tools on an unprotected website and declared a variable like that, you would be able to change the header on the website?
So no, whatever you do in the console. So in this case, I'm here, right? I'm in the console. Let's say I go into the console and I want to do something like document.body.children. And I just want to see what's in there. Oh, apparently I can't spell. Let's see, what's inside of the children? Let's say that we want to do the same command, but I want to go index 1. Okay. So now inside of index 1, ooh, maybe there's another dot children. And let's just go back inside of index 1. Why not? Okay, perfect. Because that's showing me Google. Let's see what the children in there are. Okay, looks like we want index 1 in this case again. All right. And then we can see that there's a division there, right? So I can say dot children one more time. Oh, I wonder, index 0 maybe? Nope, that's the style. Index 1. Wow, this thing is nested. Oh, so it's just an image type. That's just an image. Nice. I was hoping that I would be able to change that.
Try putting the source as the one we have in the chat.
Oh, I could do that. Okay, the src, and then make that equal to. Oh, I didn't change it. I was really hoping it would. So you could definitely manipulate things on a site and it wouldn't change anything. Let me see. So if I go here, right here, it says store, right? I could just change that to say, I don't know, garage. All right, now you can see that it says garage. But when I go to refresh it, the same code still works. So you could change things visually if you would like to, right here on yourself on the console. But these changes that you make are only happening on your local browser. They're not happening on their actual code. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. Thanks for showing that.
Of course. That was a lot of trouble. I really wish we could have changed that image there. Okay. Awesome. So let's talk about a more practical output that we can do here. All right, let's say that we wanted our user to be able to type in their name, and then we could show them a greeting referencing their name. All right. So now this works for prices of things like cars, your website. All right. So I'm going to create a new div here. And this div is just going to have an input field, and it's going to have an ID of a selector of input name. Then I'm going to give it a placeholder of please input your name. And yes, I know I spelled that incorrectly. Okay, so there's my input field, and I'm just going to have a button. And let's make this button submit. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to have another div. And this div is just going to have an ID of output. So now what's going on here? All right, let's take a look at our index.html now. Here I have, please input your name. And I have this button to be able to submit this information. Well, maybe I want this button to console.log what's in here once the button is clicked. Well, that's called an onClick function. So I'm going to go ahead and give this button an onClick function. And I'm going to say show name is going to be the function that is triggered whenever this button is clicked. All right. So I wanted to show name. Now this function doesn't exist. And if I take a look at my HTML now, when I go to refresh, if I click on the button, it tells me show name is not defined. This doesn't exist. So let's create show button. or show name, sorry, const show name. Okay, well, what does this function do? Well, the first thing that I want to do is I want to grab the name, right? So here's the div. I want to grab the name. How could I grab the name that was placed inside of input dash name?
Just return the ID.
Okay, so I could grab it by ID. How do I do that? So let's say name input is equal to what? So document, because we know we're referencing the document. How do I get something by ID?
Dot query selector.
Yeah, so we want to do got a get element by ID. What's the ID that we want here?
Wouldn't it be the ID you assign to it?
Yeah. So in this case, it's input name. So let's go input dash name. That's the ID that I assigned to it. And let's go with value. And for now, let's just console.log that name input, just so that we can see it. And I should probably utilize let there. Okay, so please enter your name. Let's say Francisco. I click submit. And now we can see that in the console, Francisco is showing. It's it's grabbing this input field by ID and then grabbing the value of that input field. And that's what gives it Francisco. Go ahead, Anthony.
Hey Francisco, so I remember we talked about the whole like separation of, was it concerns, or like where you want to do like your HTML on one page, your JavaScript on one page, and then are you doing it all on the same page just for like demonstration purposes, or does it like not matter that much?
Just for demonstration purposes. I'm about to show you how to separate all of your code into a JavaScript file here shortly.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Can you just hover over the code you put up in the body?
The code I put up in the body.
Yeah, this one, yeah, line 28 and all that.
Of course. Do you want me to break it down, or you just want to take a look at it?
Is show name a built-in method, or you made that up?
Show name, I built that. So this is the function that I created down here.
Oh, okay, that was what I was missing. All right, cool.
Awesome. Okay, so now it's showing me the name, but what if I wanted to display here on this division, all right? What if I wanted to do something like that? Well, instead of just console.logging it, I can also grab that division, right? So let's say let output be equal to document. How do I grab that division again?
You could do it by children.
I could do it
or
by
the ID.
Yeah, but I think in this case, it would be simpler if I grab it by the ID. So I grab it by output. All right, because that's the ID that I gave it. And now I can just change the inner text within output. So I can say output dot inner text is equal to hello, and maybe we could utilize some string interpolation here. So hello, and then make these ampersands, name input, and close the ampersand. All right. So now what's going to happen when I utilize this program? Let's check it out. So I type in Francisco, and when I click submit, we see hello Francisco pop up under it. All right. So what's happening is when I click on that submit function, or that button submit, this onClick function is being triggered, show name. So it goes down to show name. It grabs the name or whatever was placed inside of this input field. It grabs it. It then grabs the output by ID, and it gives the output an inner text attribute. So it's telling it, hey, inside of your inner text, you will display hello and then whatever was placed inside of the name input. And that's how we get hello, Francisco, to show up in a division right under that input field. Does anyone have any questions about that? No questions. Too easy?
Francisco, I'll ask, just whenever you, what's like, whenever you do something like this, what's like a practical purpose where you see something like this on the web? Just as an example.
Yeah, definitely. Well, a practical purpose is Google, right? If we talk about this, I'm not sure if it will be able to console.log this. Maybe we can, let me see if I can grab this field here. Class ID, there's the ID. Oh, come on. Hello. Okay, so you see how right now I typed in hello into the Google and I'm able to say, hey, document.getElement by ID. I'm telling it the ID to grab and then to print out the value, right? Which is essentially just the input field that's here within the Google page, right? Well, what would happen in the background is Google, right, or this front end interface would then grab my input of whatever I'm placing here, and it would make a request to the backend or to their server that then grabs all of the results that I need to see. And that's what takes me to the next web page, which this is the response from the server saying, oh, okay, they're looking for something. Hello, here's all the related data that you can display for the user. And then after that, whatever front end framework they're using is what displays this page for me. Does that answer your question, Robert?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So just like Anthony said, we just went over all of these things, but we want to make sure that we isolate this behavior, right? So now how can I isolate all of this script tag? I don't want all of this code to be existing here, and I actually don't need all this commented code. Actually, I'll keep it for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of that out and paste it within this script tag. Okay, but now if I go to index.html, if I put Francisco in here and I click submit, it's going to tell me show name doesn't exist. But show name does exist within my script tag. Why is it telling me the show name doesn't exist when I click that button?
Yeah, link
Yeah.
to
Yeah, they're not linked together. They don't know that one or the other exist, right? Because I have this script here, but this script doesn't have the code for show name. It doesn't know that function exists. So I'm simply just going to map it by giving it a source attribute. And I'm going to tell it that within this directory, I want it to utilize main.js as its source. So now, when I go back to my browser, if I put something like Anthony, and then I go to submit, it will say, hello, Anthony. Because when I click on submit, it triggers this script tag. The script tag says, hey, you want to go look at main.js. It goes into main.js, finds the function named show name, and it executes this code. Does anyone have any questions about the process of linking your script tag and how the DOM works and changing the values or displaying values within your HTML document?
Can I just see the link for the main.js?
All right. The last thing we're going to cover before we go into our break is going to be the different types of selectors. So far we've seen get element by ID. Well, what if I wanted to give something a class name, right? Let's say all of my images have a class name. So let me go ahead and give both of my images here a class. Let's say cat image. Okay, well, how do I grab something by classes? It's essentially the same thing. I'm going to say document. Oh, forgot I can't do that. Dot get element by elements by class name, because we know classes are for multiple. And I think I named it cat class. Is that what I named it? Or cat image? There you go. Cat image. Well, we can see that when I run this, it's going to return to me a collection of both images. It gives me an array of all the times this class instance was utilized. I can also grab by something as simple as tag names. So I can say document dot get element by tag name. And this tag name could be something like, I don't know, let's say button. Oh, and I probably want that to be inside of quotation marks. So it tells me that there's only one button in there. That button should have a value of submit. So we can take a look at its inner HTML and inner text. So there it is, submit. The button is working well. And then the next thing that we have is selector. So let's try to query selector. So let's say document, apologize, dot get element. Well, I apologize, it's query selector. And let's say this query selector, let's say we're just trying to grab a div in this case. Well, we have a lot of divs, right? But notice that when I run document.query selector and I just put a division in there, it only returns the very first instance of that, right? That's what we're seeing here. This is returning the first division and the first division only. If I wanted to see something like all of the divisions, I would have to run document.query selector all. And then I could put something like an anchor tag. And that would actually return all instances of an anchor tag that exists within my document. Does anyone have any questions over the different types of selectors? Okay. Pretty easy. Let's go ahead and pause the recording here. All right, welcome back, everyone. We got a couple more topics to go ahead and cover today. We're going to cover how to create HTML elements with JavaScript by manipulating our DOM, how to create and add event listeners to the DOM, and how to work with forms. Well, so far we've talked about how we can manipulate certain values within the DOM, right? One specific way that we did this was we created this input field. Where did you go? There you go. We created this input field within main that would say show name. It would take in someone's name input, and then upon clicking the button of submit, it would go into the div of ID output and actually give it some inner text. Now it gave it inner text, but it didn't give it a paragraph tag. It didn't give it any sort of actual HTML element in there. It just simply gave it text. It placed text within this file. So we can see it happening here. Let's say Francisco, I click on submit. And if I go to inspect this specific division here, we can see that I have my division up top, which takes in my two children, my input field and my button. But that division here in the bottom of div output, it just has text of hello Francisco, right? It's not wrapped in any sort of p tag or h1 tag or anything like that. So let's change that. Let's create an HTML element in there that would actually do this information. Well, how can I do that, right? I want to do that with JavaScript. I want to make sure that I'm not doing this by hard coding it in. So by doing it with JavaScript, it means that I need to actually grab some sort of element. So here we have my output. And I'm just going to rename this output to be parent. Because it's going to be the parent of whatever is living within it, right? This is my division. It's my parent division of my output. So I have my parent. And I just simply want this document.getElement by ID to turn into an H1 element. So what I can say is, I can say let H1, and I don't have to name it H1. I'm just calling it H1 so that I can, whenever I'm looking at my code, I know this is how I'm referencing an H1 tag. And I can say document dot create element, right? And when I go to create an element, it's looking for a tag name. Notice that it already recognizes a couple of them. So it tells me A for anchor tag, there's abbreviation, there's all of these other things that I can create. I can create body tags. I can create main tags. Any tag that we can possibly think of with HTML, I can also create it here. And let's actually just make this an H2 so that it's different. And let's create this element. Okay, so now I created an H2 tag. This H2 tag now needs text, right? So how do I give this H2 tag the inner text of hello, whatever the value that the user input placed in there? How can I do that?
H2 dot inner text equals the value that they put in. So I guess like name input dot value or hello.
Yeah, and then you said name input. Now, I already did dot value up here.
Oh, okay, so you don't have to worry about it twice.
Perfect, awesome. Yeah, so now I have my H2, and I've created this H2 element. Well, let's see what happens here. Let's say I put Francisco in there. I click my submit function. My function is being activated, but nothing's happening. Why is that?
We still have to append it to the DOM.
Yeah, it currently doesn't exist anywhere on the DOM, right? So I have to give it to the parent. So now in order for the parent to get this information, well, we know that any division or any element can have children. So what I would say is parent dot append child. I'm going to give it a child element, and that child element will be the H2 that I just created. So now let's try this again. We create Francisco, we go to click submit, and now we see this element show up here. Let me go ahead and take a look at it here. Well, when I take a look, I got my first division, and my second division now has a child. That child is hello Francisco, and I have no idea what these quotation marks are. But now we can see that hello Francisco is being placed there. Hello is something that was hard-coded, and Francisco is what came in dynamically through the user input. Does anyone have any questions over how I created this element? Okay, if no one has any
Mind
questions.
just going through it real quick again? Just
Yeah, of course. And let's try to have a little bit of fun with it. So currently I have this cat picture. Can someone send me a source for a dog picture really quick? And just send it on the chat. And please make sure it's appropriate for the recording as well. Okay, so currently I have this let name input, and it takes in a value, and I have a parent, right? That's all I have. I just have the value of whatever is placed inside of the name input, and I have the value of whatever is placed inside of my parent or I have the value of a parent division. So here's my parent division. There's nothing in it. It's just an empty div. But I'm going to place in something inside of that parent division. And it looks like Dakota just sent me a link to a dog. So let me go ahead and say const dog, and I'm gonna make that equal to a dog. Oh, geez. Okay, and now let's grab the cat as well. So let's say const cat is equal to, and let me just grab that from in here. Where's that cat source? There it is. Okay, so now we have our dog and we have our cat, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this show a cat inside of the parent division. Well, first I have to take in my name input, right? And then I can choose whatever goes inside of the name input. So I'm able to capture the input that's being placed in there. So now I need to create an image that will later be appended into the parent, right? Currently, the parent has no children. If I take a look in here, I see my header, I see a nav bar. If I take a look inside of main, I have this division that has 2 children, and then I have this division named output, which is what I'm holding as parent, and it has no content in it. It has no children, and I'm trying to give it a child of either a cat or a dog. So I need to create an image element. How can I do that? Okay, yeah, I could do something like img, right? But I actually want to create that image element using JavaScript. So how can I do that? Utilizing the DOM.
Document dot create element,
Okay.
and then put img inside.
Create element and then img. Okay, perfect. So we just created an image tag, right? Now this image has an attribute named source. So now if it's dog, I want to give it, if the name input is dog, I want to give it the source of this dog. And otherwise, I want to give it the source of cat. So how can I do that?
If name input equals, dog. And then inside this statement, do img dot src equals dog.
img dot source is equal to dog.
And then else for else, image dot source equals cat.
Okay, so now I have my way of giving a source to this image, but this image still doesn't exist inside of my document, all right? This image only exists in my program. How do I add it to the parent?
Parent dot append child.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and say parent dot append child because I'm giving it a child element, and that child will be the image. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and I'm just going to say dog in this case because we haven't seen the dog. Okay, and there's the Shiva. Well, now what if I want it to be cat? If I click submit. Oh no, that failed. I wonder why that failed.
I don't know if this failing might just be appending extra cats down below.
It is. Nice. Good catch. Yeah, so it's not failing. It's just appending extra cats because I'm not resetting the number of children. I'm just adding into it, right? So I can do cat, click submit, it adds a cat. I can do dog, click submit, it adds a dog. So I'm now creating elements and adding them onto my DOM. Does that answer your question, Anthony?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Are there any questions regarding how we created elements and included them in our DOM? All right, if there are no questions, then let's start talking about some events. Okay, so events. When I go to click on this button, I'm already doing an event, and actually I think there's a whole list of events that we can look at here. Let me bring that over. Nope, that's the document object model. No, that does talk about events, right? No, here we go. Okay, I need to find a source for, oh, I clicked on the wrong link. I apologize, everyone. Here you go. So here is all of their different events, right? We have an on after print, an on before print. There's quite a bit of them. And actually, as I'm looking at them, these aren't anywhere near all of them, right? There's all these other events that are happening. There's on change, on focus, if it's valid, on key down. Here's some mouse events. We got mouse over, right, which is essentially like hover. So let's put some of these events into play. And actually our index.html is starting to get a little noisy. So I'm going to go ahead and comment the majority of it out. Just so that we could see some clean content here. Okay, so I'm just going to make a div. And I'm going to give it an ID of box. So now the ID of box, maybe I could give it some styling here just to get it formatted in a way that I can see it. Okay, let's take a look at what that looks like so far. Okay, so there's my box. Doesn't do anything, right? It's just a box that's existing inside of my HTML file. Well, now, what if I wanted to have some sort of a type of effect whenever something happens to it, right? Maybe I want to add an on-click function. Maybe I want to make it on mouse over or an on hover, something like that, right? So let's say on. As soon as I put on, VS Code already knows I'm trying to add some sort of event listener into it. So it gives me a whole list of everything that I can put in there. I can drag, I can point, I can submit. The more common ones that you'll see is on mouse over, you'll see on submit, and you'll see on click. And then also on change. So those are the most common ones that you'll see, right? So let's try to manipulate some of these. So let's say on click is the function that we do. And let's do change color. So there's our function. We have an on change function. Let's go to main.js and create this on change function. Oh, hello. All right, so let's go const change color. And then let's say that what this does is it's going to take in an event. And let me go to the on click. Say it takes in an event. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to do event dot target dot style dot background color. I'm going to make that equal to black. I believe that should work. Probably something like this. I think it's background and then color. Okay, let's see what this does. I'm going to go ahead and inspect this. I go to my console. I click on it. It gives me an error. It says change color is not defined. So let's make sure it is defined. So here's my const change color is definitely defined. Oh, I commented out my script tag. That will do it. Okay. So I go to refresh it, I have a white box, right? Well, when I click it, we can see that I can change the color of this box. Now notice that I didn't do anything like document.get element by ID or anything like that to be able to grab that, element. Instead, what I said is, hey, this event is happening somewhere, and I'm passing in the event into my JavaScript file, all right? So if I take a look at HTML, there's an onClick event happening on this division. And to this division, I am passing in the function change color with the event being registered. Well, in my JavaScript file, all I'm saying is, hey, this event is happening somewhere on my HTML sheet. I want you to find where this event is happening. So it grabs the division. I want you to change the style property of background color to black. So all it's doing is identifying an event happened on the browser, grabbing the place where that event happened, and then applying whatever code I am telling it to apply afterwards. Right? So again, I click on it. If I click anywhere on my browser, it's going to register an event. But the moment I click on this box, that's when it knows that's where the target is. This is where the onClick function is. And that's how it changes that color. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know in CSS, they also have events. Is it better to do it in JavaScript, or is it just like preferential?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's some events that are available on CSS, right? For example, the unhover event. The unhover, that does happen within CSS. And I also have a mouse over event that happens within JavaScript. Now, something like onClick, that is not something that I have the availability to manipulate with CSS. So there's some events that will allow me to, that I do have available to me through JavaScript that I don't have through CSS. Now, another thing to kind of separate the both of them is having divisions within divisions that have separate events, right? I wouldn't want those things to be able to overwrite one another. So I would want to choose either JavaScript or CSS to handle all of my events. And JavaScript typically gives me the most amount of control over how to handle these events, which we'll cover here shortly. Does that answer your question, Clarice?
Yes.
Awesome. Any other questions?
So, maybe I'm like getting too far ahead here, but are you able to like group things together and kind of like make it where it's like almost like a class, I guess? So, like in your JavaScript file, are you able to work with classes, or for like DOM manipulation, is it purely just kind of like arrow function building to perform like a specific task?
For now, yes. Once we get into React, we'll definitely get into more of a compartmentalized ways of being able to reutilize these tools and kind of essentially build a class for each component. But for now, we're just going to keep it with JavaScript and functional components.
All right, thank you.
Of course. Okay. So now the next example that I want to show is us manually adding an event listener. All right. Oh, there you go. So currently I made this change color and I have all this information, but that's not necessary if I want to add it manually. So let's go ahead and take off this color attribute here. Oh, let me go ahead and Command X, Command V. Let me comment that out. Okay. So I have this box. It still has my index, still has an ID. Well, let's go ahead and add an event listener to this division through JavaScript rather than me hard coding it in. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot this down. And let's say, let box be equal to document dot get element by ID. And that ID is box. Okay, so now I have that box. Well, how do I add an event listener to it? I'm going to go ahead and use the property box. And I'm going to say, I want to add an event listener into this function. Well, the first thing that it needs to know is what kind of event listener is it that I'm looking for? So here's where I would say on click, on abort, on whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And in this case, I'm going to say on mouse over. I think that's correct. Let me make sure that that's correct. On mouse over. Yep, that is correct. So I'm going to say when the mouse hovers over this division, there's going to be an event that gets triggered. And I'm just simply going to create an arrow function within here. Because this function takes in one, the name of the event, and then two, what that event will do. All right, what is it that I want this function to do when this event is triggered? Well, all I simply wanted to do is I wanted to identify the event target. I want to grab the style of said target, and I'm just going to change the background color. And let's change it this time to something like CN. Okay, well, let's see what happens when I see this code. Gonna go ahead and hover over it. Oh, hello. That's not working the way I wanted it to. I wonder if maybe I did something incorrectly. Okay.
When you're doing event listeners, don't you just do mouse over instead of on mouse over? Because I know you changed on click to click.
Let's check that. Oh yeah, that did do it. Thank you. So I currently have this box, right? And just like Megan mentioned, I don't need the on portion because I'm adding it myself, right? It's my own event listener that I'm adding to it. So now when my mouse hovers over it, it turns it into CN. Nothing happens when I hover out of it. So maybe I need to create something else, a different event that handles when my mouse moves out. So let's go ahead and add that here. So box, I want to add another event listener to this box. And now that event listener will be mouse out. Again, I want to trigger the event. And what is it that we want this event to do? Let's say I want to change the color to white, back to white. How can I do that?
Same as
Copy line
above,
3.
but make it white.
Yeah, same as above, but I just make it white, right? So I want to access the target, change the background color. And make that white. Okay, so now on mouse over, it turns cyan. On mouse out, it turns back to white. And now I created a hover function. And all it's doing is tracking the events. It tracks the event where my mouse hovers over the division, and then it tracks the event where my mouse hovers out of the division. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Yeah, Francisco, could you go back to your code real quick? I just want to see what you did again.
Of course.
Okay.
Do you just want to see it, or is there anything you would like me to explain?
I just wanted to see it.
Okay.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Of course.
And then would also showing your HTML for that inline styling.
HTML for inline style. Here you go.
And on that, if you are going to style inline, is there any order that matters, or is it just like when you're making a CSS?
Oh, it's just like CSS. It really doesn't matter the order that you're putting it in. You just want to make sure that each CSS command is separated by a semicolon. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. The next portion that I want to talk about is propagation, right? And I'm starting to notice that we're running a little bit short on time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some code from our curriculum. That way you guys don't have to see me grab things over and over, type things over and over again. And let's go ahead and place that in here, all right? So I currently have this division. Each one of these divisions have these attributes. And let me go ahead and also add these functions from down below. Let me comment this out here. Okay, so in index.html, I have this parent division that can say hello. This parent division has 3 children. It has say hi, and it has this, this is the second div, and this is the third div. We don't necessarily need this is the second div or this is the third. So I'm just going to get rid of that so that we don't have to see that white noise, right? And let's give each one of these a background color just so that we could see what's happening. Let's do this one gray. And let's do this one. Okay. So now let's see our page. So currently right now, we don't even see the gray, right? If we take a look at our selectors or we take a look at our elements, we see the body. The body then has a parent division. And inside of that parent division this is the first div. But we don't even see the gray being demonstrated on the outside. All right, if we wanted to see the gray, we could definitely do something like maybe add padding in there. And let's just do 15 pixels. Okay, so now we could see the gray, right? We have our body, we have this div, and then we have our child within it. And currently they're separated. Notice that both the parent div and the child div have an onClick function. One of them says hi, hello, and the other one says hi. And if we take a look at the JS, we can see that hi is for the inner function and outer is for the, and hello is for the outer function, right? Well, now let's take a look at what happens when we actually go to trigger this onClick. So I'm going to click strictly on the gray portion, which is our outer division. Well, when I click on it, I see hello, outer. Great. Now I wonder what happens when I click on this blue division. Well, when I click on the blue division, notice that both hi inner was logged onto my console and hello outer was logged into my console, right? Both events were triggered at the same time. Does everyone understand why that's happening? Or can someone explain to me why that's happening?
Because they're nested.
Yeah, they're nested, right? So when I click on that division, that child division, I'm also clicking on the parent division. They're both being clicked at the same time, right? They're nested within one another. So they don't know how to differentiate themselves from one and the other. So in order to fix this, it's basically happening like a waterfall effect, right? If I go to TL draw, the equivalent of what's happening is, let me go ahead and maybe draw in a different box here. I have my parent division and I have a child division within it, right? When I go to click on this child division, the first event that gets triggered is the inner. So maybe we could do something like this. So inner is triggered. But then after this inner event is triggered, the waterfall effect happens, and then my outer event is triggered. So what I needed to do, I need to specify to my program that if something happens within this function or within this division, it shouldn't trigger this waterfall. It shouldn't move out of this division. Well, in order to do that, all I'm going to simply do is tell my code to stop propagation, which is just a fancy word for the waterfall effect. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and say event dot stop propagation. Okay, so now when I run this, this is going to tell my program, hey, if this event specifically, the say hi event is triggered, do not do anything else. Like, don't waterfall yourself out to any other events around us or to anything that belongs to the parent. This is only happening to the child. So now let's take a look at our document here. Let's make sure that it's working correctly. So again, if I click on the gray, I see hello outer. That's perfect. That's what I wanted to see. Well, now what happens when I click on the cyan blue? Okay, the cyan blue is not working. It says stop propagation is not a function at say hi. Okay, so maybe I spelled something wrong. Let's go ahead and take a look at our JS here. Oh, it's propagation. There you go. That's the problem. All right, so I misspelled something, and that's the reason why I failed. So let's click on the gray. We can still see the outer. Well, now when I click on the cyan, we can see that only the inner is triggered, and the waterfall effect to trigger the parent never happens. It only stops here at the child level, and it never triggers the parent's events. Does anyone have any questions about propagation?
Could I just see your code again?
Of course. This code or the HTML code?
Yes, this one. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. No questions at all.
What might be a time when you would want to use that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, let's say you have something that's animated, right? Or you're making a really cool website that has a bunch of events. Let's say maybe if you click on an image, the image spins to the left. But then if you click on a sub image within it, that sub image is supposed to have a different effect, whether that's maybe scrolling through a carousel or just changing what the image is displaying. Well, then at that point, you would have to separate those two events so that they're not triggering one another. Does that answer your question, Anne?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the last thing we have to talk about today is going to be handling forms. So let's create a form real quick. All right, in this form, let's see, do we have enough time to code this out? We should have enough time. All right, let's go ahead and create this form real quick. So I have this form, right? This form is going to take an input. And this input is just going to be the name, right? So let's say name here. And I need to give it a name to this input field. Well, this input field is going to have the name of name because it's taking in the value of name. And the placeholder will be name. So maybe here we could just say input name, because this is an input field that is taking in the value of name. The name that I'm giving this input field is name because it's taking in the value of name. And then for placeholder, I can say type in your name. Okay, so there's my input field. In another input field, I want to capture what this person's favorite color is. So I'm going to say input color. And then the name is going to be color. And the placeholder will be what's your favorite color. All right. Finally, I want to have a button to be able to submit all of this information. Oh, hello. So there's my button to submit all this information. So I'm just going to tell this button that it is a type of submit. Okay, so there's my form. Currently, my form isn't doing anything. And if I go to my browser, when I click the submit button, notice that we're getting this question mark sign up above, right? I can refresh this all I want. I can even go back to just index.html. But when I click the submit button, something's happening in my browser. My browser is directing me to a new URL. And it has the question mark. It's saying, hey, this was submitted, but I have no idea what to do with it. And it's telling me there is a variable name that was set to nothing and a variable color that was also set to nothing. So let's say that I put Francisco and color red. I go to submit this information. Well, now it's telling me that in index.html, there was a form that was submitted. One of the values that was submitted was name, and it has the value of Francisco. Another key that was submitted was color, and it has the value of red. So that's great. But what exactly does that tell me? How do I work with this information? Well, let's create a function that will handle this onSubmit method, and then create a way for this function to grab that data. So now let's say form submission, or let's just call it favorite color. And we are submitting a form, so this should take in an event. Let's go to JavaScript. And let's see what we can make here. So I got to make that function. That function is called favorite color. That function also takes in an event. But what is it going to do? What is this event going to happen? Well, we see that every time I click on that submit portion, it was refreshing my browser. It was throwing me to a new URL. And that seemed like it was part of the default behavior. So I don't want it to do that. Because I don't want it to do that, I'm going to simply say prevent default. I don't want this behavior to happen. So now let's see what happens. All right, go back to index.html. I put Francisco. I put the color red. And if I click on submit, it's not sending me anywhere. My page isn't refreshing. My browser isn't going anywhere. It's staying within the same page. Good. So now event prevent default is helping me stay on the same page. Well, now what about the form data? How do I grab the form information? Well, what I'm going to say is const form data. And I'm going to make this equal to a data type. This is new and has been introduced to JavaScript, where I'm going to tell it, hey, there is form data that is being passed through JavaScript, and this is how I want you to handle it. I want you to grab the event target. Right? So the event of the form is being submitted. So we know that that's where the event is happening. And I'm saying, hey, this form, because the event of submission happened, and it happened upon a form. And I'm telling my program, I want you to grab that form and restructure it so that it's a workable dictionary or a workable object for me. Well, let's take a look at what that looks like here. Let's say we want a console.log form data. Okay, again, we go to Francisco, we go and type red. And now when I click submit, I get this form data object down below. And that form data object has almost nothing in it, right? It just tells me that there's a couple of methods that are built with this form data object. And I could continue opening this up, but it's just not something that I'm ready to work with yet. So there's still some things that I need to do to change it. Well, although I turned it into a new data structure, I now need to turn it into something that's, something JSON readable or something that JavaScript's able to work with. So now I just need to format that data. So const format data, and I'm going to make that to equal to an object because I want this to be an object. I'm going to check the entries. I apologize. It's form entries from entries. And I'm going to tell it, oh, wow, that this is from the form data. So now let's console.log this format data. And let's see what that's doing. Again, we have Francisco, we have red. And when I click on submit, now I'm getting an actual workable object. If I take a look at it, we have two keys, the key of color, the key of name, and we have the values that were placed within the form. So in index.html, I have these two input fields. Notice that I have the name of name and the name of color. Well, those match my object here. I have the key of color and the key of name. And that is in direct relationship to the name that I am giving my input field. So in JavaScript, I'm telling it, I don't want you to refresh or direct me anywhere when this form is submitted. I don't want you to do any of your default behavior. After that, on line 5, I am telling my program, hey, there is a form that is being submitted, and I need you to turn it into a form data structure. So it takes in the event's target, which is the form, takes in the form, and turns that form into a form data. After that, we need that form data to turn into an actual object that I can manipulate and work with. So I format it, utilizing the from entries function into an object. And when I console log it, that's how I see a workable object on my console. Does anyone have any questions over what I just did?
Can you show your code once more?
Which one?
Just that little section right there. It might just be I use Firefox, so even like when I changed it, it still looked the same, but it just had like one small difference. I guess I was looking for the like quotations to go away like yours did around like the keys. Mine still shows like quotes, but it changes, like it gives a different identifier. So I'm assuming it works because mine still would show like color with quotes and name also in quotes, but then say Francisco. But then like to the left of it. Okay, I see. Sorry. It's just different format because Firefox. So my prototype object was just everything was formatted different. So I was wondering if it was working, but all right.
I see. Okay, awesome. All right. When I have this information, but it's not being rendered anywhere on my screen. So here on index.html, I'm just going to have this div, and I'm going to give it the ID of output. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell output, let output be equal to, I'm going to grab that by ID. So get element by ID. I'm going to grab output. So now I grab that division. And all I'm going to do is give it some inner text so that it's displaying the information that I just got. So I'm going to say output dot inner text is equal to, I'm going to use some interpolated string. And here I'm going to say, form data or format data, I apologize, dot name. Yeah, add an as there. So Francisco's favorite color is. Then I'm gonna say format data dot color. And now let's see what happens. So again, we see Francisco here. We place in red. When I click on submit, we can see Francisco's favorite color is red because it's grabbing it from those object entries. And that is it. Does anyone have any questions over how we constructed this function and we were able to manipulate the DOM with JavaScript to create each one of these elements and handle events?
So does the way that we name our input field when it comes to casing matter?
When it comes to casing?
Yeah, like if I want to give it multiple names, like for that name, if you put like input first name, or like I think you did that input name, but then in name, if you also want to put like first name and you did it like following the same format, like I guess what casing does it have to be in, or does it matter?
Yeah, it doesn't matter because this is just a an actual variable for the key, right? So just follow the same key parameters where you don't want to utilize something like numbers to start it off with. And you could start with whatever names you want. So this is going to cause an error, I believe. Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah, so this is undefined because it can't find that key. But now you can see that I have first name here, and it's still able to create the dictionary or the object, I apologize. Does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, it does.
Any other questions?
Would you mind showing on your HTML how you designated that form? I thought I saw something like on.
Are you talking about this? Did we lose Brian?
I'm here, but I'm lagging a little bit. Okay, yeah, on submit. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Of course, no problem. Yeah, definitely writing code to get a feel for it will solidify things. I know that seeing things over and over again is probably not the best thing to learn.
So what about so my form, when I type it, it like auto populates action equals, what does that do? Or like what's the difference instead of on submit if you had action?
So action is for directing your form to a different place, right? So if I were to utilize something like, if I were to utilize the default behavior of my submit function, I would also want to give it an action, as in, now that this is submitted, I want you to grab this data and send it to this other page so that this other page can grab that information and render it on the screen.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any other questions.
Actually, I did have one.
Go ahead, Cody.
It was about event target. Is there like I guess start explaining. I was kind of doing some reading about it in depth, and it was talking about like event target versus event current target in regards to like bubbling. Is that like too much of a question to answer briefly?
That's something that I would prefer it if me and you met and talked about it, since it's a complex subject and it could confuse other students.
Okay, cool.
Okay, fantastic. That is going to conclude our lecture today. Thank you so much, everyone. Let me go ahead and stop the recording here.